Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Contact Lost, your weekly Thursday live show. I'm Joker, and my co host tonight is none other than Tweak,
Hello, everyone.
as he usually is. And we've got two special guests tonight. So, first up, we've got Rob from Goonhammer. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Joker. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all ours. And we've also got Jay, who's a Team Poland debutant. Debutant, I think, is the word, right? Tweet, correct me if I'm wrong. My English is obviously crap.
Debutee? I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
I mean, we have an American here. You might as well just ask.
No, I like debutante, actually, whether it's correct or not.
Okay, well, we'll go with that then.
Hello.
So you've had a first showing at the Euro Trash Cup for Team Poland, playing Wotan.
Yep,
Now part of the
exactly.
team, all good stuff. Today we're going to discuss mathematics, so I'm sure everyone is very much excited, and let's just get straight into it. But before we do, first of all, a massive thank you to our sponsors, The Army Painter and Weyland-Yutani, as well as our community of Patreons. Now, before we actually go into the topic, why don't you guys say a little bit about yourselves as you're here for the first time? Rob, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Robert TheChirurgeon Jones. I'm co-founder and CEO of Goonhammer. We're a website that handles reviews and reports on games, competitive content. We primarily cover Warhammer 40K. We cover everything in the tabletop space. We have about 4.5 million readers, and we've been operating. We started in about 2018, and we became a company about 2020.
Mind blowing. Jay?
Hello, I'm just Jay. I've played my first tournament outside of Poland last month. I've started playing in 4th edition in the Battle for Makrach. But it was all kitchen table games, and I've left the hobby for a long time. And I've went back 2 years ago with my first tournament for 750 points, and I was tracked into. I was playing demons all the way up till 2 months ago, and then the representation happens, and I'm trying out new armies, and I'm enjoying the hobby and the time with you.
Cool. Great to have you.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. So, Rob, you've obviously wasted your whole intro during the pre-show conversations
Sorry.
that we've had.
No, we're blessed.
Yeah. It's all good. Right. So, to the topic at hand, guys, you play games of Warhammer 40k, and well, you're also here for a reason, so it might be a moot question. But do you math before or during games of Warhammer? Rob, let's start with you.
Okay, yeah, I could take this. I mean, that's a tough question. Like, I will sometimes do back of the. So I'm kind of a bad person to ask this. So the other piece and the reason I'm here is because I do a lot of the writing weekly on a column called Hammer of Math, where I cover statistical topics in Warhammer 40,000, or other games. I took that over from Kevin Gensen mid last year, though he and I had alternated on it. I do a lot of work on statistics in the competitive meta and talking about what it means for a faction to hit 60% win rate, 70% win rate, that kind of thing. I'm kind of a bad person for that because I tend to play my games with no thoughts, head empty, just vibes. And I rely on getting a bunch of reps in to understand. So, okay, part of this is that the stats are super important, right? In the sense that I think it's very important, not necessarily to be able to say, oh, well, I know there's a probability that this one roll will end up with 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. I think it's more important to understand the general range of outcomes you can expect, what's likely and what's not likely, because as humans, we have a tendency to overestimate probabilities or not really understand how to apply them. It's the kind of thing where, like, you see this all the time when you read old logs about or old interviews about, like, the Civ games, where the designers will talk about if somebody had, like, a unit that went up against another unit and it said they had a 70% chance of winning, then if they lost, they'd feel it was bullshit. But 70% still means you lose 30% of the time. Those are pretty good odds of losing. So a huge piece of it is, I think, about understanding statistics in Warhammer is really understanding how you can circumvent your brain's instinct to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen. One of the big ones is charge math. Understanding that a 9-inch charge out of deep strike, which is like the most common roll that people kind of have to take a chance on in the game, understanding that that is very unlikely. It's about 28% chance, I think, without a reroll, and with a reroll, it's like 49%. You aren't going to make those. And understanding that ahead of time is way more important than knowing the actual math behind it. Just knowing, hey, if I only have one charge to make and it's a 9-up and I have a reroll and I'm banking the game on it, I've made a horrible mistake to get to this point. That's why I think if it's late in the game, close games always come down to dice anyway. But really understanding things like that helps me temper it with like, oh, okay, well, so what I really want is 4 or 5 9-inch charges out of deep strike. So then I can fail them all and still be angry later. But having that redundancy is a much bigger deal, and being able to understand, like the other one. So it's like the big ones are that and Overwatch. Understanding why most Overwatch is just not a good idea, because you're just not going to get the outcomes you want. Like the math changes substantially when you have lethal hits or sustained hits, but generally you can kind of, once you understand the math behind that, once you understand how unlikely getting a certain outcome is, you can kind of hold back and be like, okay, is this really the time to throw that, like to take the chance and make it happen? Is the outcome I could get worth that? Or am I just throwing away command points I don't need to throw away?
Yeah, Joker, I have no idea why you're laughing at the topic of Overwatch.
I'm happy you picked it up.
Yeah, that was the immediate shot.
So Tweak, see, you have a soulmate, also not doing that much math, but rolling with the vibes. But yeah, so Rob, for context, Tweak is one step behind you. He likes to Overwatch a lot of the times, and the results usually end up the same, to the point that we play so often, I sometimes just tell him, dude, don't.
But that's why
Don't do
I
it.
picked up Death Guard with only Flamers, and now it's way better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
life changing. I mean, but that's kind of like it's a question of like, what's the point of doing statistics in Warhammer, right? I see a lot of people will say, oh well, this is just theory, or you're just doing math, and in the real game, such and such happens, and it's like that's not really the point, right? The point is to build a process for making the right decisions. It's understanding, like, because there are plenty of times when taking a chance on Overwatch is good. I had a game last week where I played against somebody, and on turn 1, they had area denial, so they scouted a sentinel forward and moved it to the middle objective. I had a Vindicator. Vindicators aren't likely to get off, I'm playing Chaos, so I have the Dark Packs. I know if I hit a Vindicator, I'm going to hit it twice, or hit with the Vindicator, I'll hit twice. So I know that when I fire that up, all I need to do is get through 2 shots, and then that wrecks my opponent's game plan and changes the amount of EP they're going to score. That's a big enough upside to make that decision worth it, even if I don't get the outcome I wanted. And ultimately, like, that's the real piece, is like, rather than looking at the outcome, you have to look at the process. So statistics in Warhammer is more about building the process. How do you understand when you want sustained hits versus lethal hits? Because a lot of rules give you a choice. How do you understand when you need redundancy? How do you understand how to overcommit? One of the biggest mistakes newer players make is they don't overcommit when they're trying to kill units. They get too cocky about, or too sure about how much damage they'll do, and they'll split fire. They'll make mistakes about when they should shoot. And the reality is you don't need those 3 bolter shots on that other unit over there. What you really need is 1 more point of damage. So your enemy doesn't live on 1, then fall back and end up on an objective and screw you out of 5 points or change the whole game. So it's really about building the process that helps you understand when to make the right decision. That's what the stats are for.
Yeah,
All right, well,
or 80% agreed. Jay, what's your take on it? And do you do a lot of math before or during games of 40k?
I do too much math before each 40k game, basically.
You're the perfect person to be here, and we've got contrary stances. Awesome. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I was shocked when I mathed out how much percent that you have almost 50% chance of succeeding 9-inch charge with a reroll, because I felt in my guts it was never going to happen. Like, in my mind, no 9-inch charges were happening. When I was playing demons and had 2 or 3 5-inch charges with 1 reroll, I was sweating. It's it's every time when you think something, you've done as much as you can to predict what might fail and when the game always can backfire. And I'm also the my weak part is doing the muff and relying on the muff too much. Because on the one hand, you can overcommit, but on the other hand, if you muff everything to the predicted values and you have 80-70% chance of killing this, so you muff out all your turn to fill every bracket that you need to take someone from every point possible, then you fail everything and the game just ends. So you have to think about the failure points also when doing the math, and that the entropy that dice provide you with in the game is something that you have to count in even when doing the math and trying to rely on it. So basically, answering the first question that you've asked, this whole game is the math equation. You have to, before the game, do the math of when you're trying to gather the units into your list, because you might find out that the dump unit of 5 intercessors that was only in your list for sticky and backfield objective holder, when you're fighting, for example, in Nari, and someone shows you the incubi, the rain brick, you can just walk those 5 idiots and shoot them and kill within cover 5 of them, without the 6 of them with the grenade launcher, and 8 of them without the cover. It's a substantial amount of points just for 5 idiots that were meant to just keep your home objective. And doing such math, and basically, if you're building the list, you have to either on singles try to fill out every profile, every toughness profile and save profile that will probably be in the game when you will attend the event, or you have to, in the teams, if your list is tailored to counter some specific list archetype, you have to really focus and overcommit on the specific profiles. For example, if your list has to aim for countering the GSC, House of Ascension, or the Eldari, or I don't know, Thank God, that's different lists. So before the game, you do the math when building the list. In the game, you do the math when, for example, you play an army that doesn't have the access to Downies. I don't know how to call them.
That's honestly what we call them.
You have to think, what will your pieces, where will your pieces be in 1 turn, and 2 turns, and 3 turns, and plan few turns ahead. If, for example, you play Votans and you have 5 inches of movement, and you have to think about it because you don't have advance and charge and advance and shoot. You have to, besides bikes, of course, bikes can be down from the board edge, sure. But those are 1 to 3 pieces in your list, 0 to 3. So this whole game is a math equation.
True, to an extent.
Sorry.
I still choose to ignore it and just play by the heart.
You absolutely can just smash your pieces into opponent.
No, I think I made that comment sometime in the past, but essentially for me, I am way happier at this game, even on like competitive level, when I play romantically instead of overcalculating. As soon as I start calculating, I start blaming the dice. I start going like, oh, this is not an average roll, and this is not an average roll, and so on and so on. And if I just approach it with, through the heart, it's way easier to sort of accept the failure, I guess. But I need to ask, and Rob, I'll start with you. The army you play right now, is it mathematically superior and that's why you chose it? Or was it something else that made you choose it?
No, man, I'm a best overall guy. I play things because I got them painted, but I also just play all kinds of chaos stuff. So I'm working on Emperor's Children really slowly right now, and I was playing Creations of Bile. I'm trying to find the sweet spot between like what I enjoy painting and what will win me best painted, and what I can play competitively. So even when I ran Creations of Bile, I wasn't running the 30 Possessed because I know that those are like that's not going to last, and I don't want to paint 30 Possessed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd run it with. So that's like, but that does come into it. Like to Jay's point, I ran when I was running Creations of Bile, I was running Plague Marines and Obliterators in it because Obliterators as an 80 point per model unit that can get back dead models is just really good value. Where then the goal is, okay, how do I play a game of Warhammer where I'm actually playing with an extra 240 points because I got back, 3 Obliterators during the game, right? Or I'd take Plague Marines because Plague Marines are a battle line unit with toughness 5, but they also benefit from every single stat boost that the Creations of Bile could get. Plus 2 movement, plus 1 ballistic skill because they'll take the blood launch and 2 plasma guns. Yeah. So all of that stuff kind of factors into it, and I am doing the math on that. Like I think to Jay's point, doing the math on like what units you include and understanding what they can do is a huge part of it. Because then I come back to the list when I'm done building it, and I'm like, okay, what do I have? What do I have painted? How do I build that? But then also, what is this list going to be able to do and not going to be able to do? Like, does it? I know if it doesn't, even if it doesn't get a benefit, does it need a Vindicator and a Predator? And the answer was yes, because every Chaos Space Marines list needs a Vindicator and a Predator. But
Exactly.
it was also like I understood that the Obliterators were not going to get there. But then the other piece is people are always surprised because when I play with the Obliterators, I play very aggressively, and I'll push them in and use them for melee because they have 4 attacks with Strength 9 Power Fists. And if they get an extra attack or they get extra strength, they're suddenly hitting a ton of targets and punching their way through things. And knowing that they can do that, knowing what they're likely to do with that is a huge benefit. But right now it's Emperor's Children, who I thought were going to be terrible on paper when we did the Codex review, and actually are just so incredibly, insanely fast that they destroy things on the table and kind of handle things with lethal hits in a way that I was surprised by. So as soon as I get, the problem is they're going to be a best painted army for me. So like it's taking me forever to paint every model, but as soon as I get 2 Winged Demon Princes painted and I can get my hands on some of the new models, it's going to be great.
Yep. Okay, Jay, you mentioned at the very beginning that the sheer idea of 3, 5, or 6 inch charges was terrifying for you. So, in the spirit of talking about math, does doing math before the game or during the game actually deter you from taking risks? Or are those things completely unrelated, and when you see that it's worth it, you just do it?
It's hard to say because I'm naturally a person that's more afraid than not afraid. So it might be affected by my personal way of living. But if you map out every possibility and you keep in mind that you have to deliver the estimation for your team score, or you have to win if you're in singles, what will it bring you to take the risk or not take the risk? If taking the risk means you will deliver 2 more points, but you can lose 10, maybe it's not worth it. But you basically need to think about what the risks and the potential benefits will be from taking the risk. And hopefully, at the ideal time, contact your captain or the coach and ask, should you take a risk or not?
Okay. Rob, same question to you. So, are you also, like Jay, risk averse? Or, again, when you go to a tournament?
Yeah, I'm pretty risk averse because my dice are so goddamn awful. I just assume I'm going to fail rolls.
I feel like I have a soulmate now. I found a soulmate here in you.
It's the kind of thing where, so it's a curse, right? Knowing how things are supposed to go only really makes it possible to be mad when they don't go that way. But to Jay's point, like absolutely what it helps you do is understand, is the risk I'm taking too high? And I certainly will oftentimes just eat myself into bad situations anyway, because that's the kind of idiot I am. But then also, like, it helps you understand when you need a backup, when you need redundancy, right? It's like and to my good friend Scott Horace has frequently loved to say, you can't outthink a 6-up. There are times where the dice just don't work and there's nothing you can do. You failed 3 5-inch charges and everything's gone and it's fine. Like that just happens. That's where you kind of got to grin and just shrug and be like, yeah, it's fine. But it does really help you understand, like, oh, this could mess up. This could not happen. If that happens, what's my backup plan? Because understanding that just because it's a 5-inch charge doesn't mean you're going to get it. Like, what are you doing after that? Like, what are you doing if that doesn't work? And understanding that it has a good chance to not succeed will help you get that. And sometimes you just got to kind of go with it. Like, if something's so likely that it not happening would be insane, you just got to have to go with that. But there is a very real piece of, like, if I'm doing math in a game, it's like to understand, is this a good idea or a bad idea? And do I need backup for this strategy or not? And really, that's the backup piece is like the bigger part is, oh, okay, I'm going to charge this with this unit. Is that enough? I'm going to shoot this with that unit. Is that enough? Is that going to get there? And if not, what's my backup strategy? And that is more than just, oh, I shoot it with 2 units. That's more, how do I position the second unit to be able to shoot that unit and something else? And then, yeah, and then how do I do my progression to make sense? I think we had a Scary write an article for us like 3 or 4 years ago where he wrote something that sticks with me, which is like when you're doing target priority, you always start with the units that have the fewest number of possible targets to shoot at or attack, because you already you're basically trying to cut the number of decisions you have to make down to as few as possible. So you start with those units that don't have decisions, and then you go to the ones that have more and more, and you'll gradually take other things out of your decision set by killing them. And so that ends up being a huge way that you can both make and so just making sure you're positioned to have the right options where you then whittle your decision set down in the right order is like it's both a huge advantage in terms of getting the outcome you want, but it also takes a huge load off. Like, Warhammer is a very complicated game. There's a lot of stuff going on. You're at an event, you're going to play 2 more games in a day most of the time, if not 3 if you're at Adepticon doing something crazy. And so like being able to take those situations, and especially games where like it's not every game you play is going to be super hard. You're going to run into players who don't present a lot of decisions, or are just weaker players. You'll run into hard players where that game is every decision is brutal. So saving your ability to think about that for those harder games, super important.
Yeah. Also, that's why having more shooting lists is better if you're risk averse, because you can spread the decision processes and lower down the curve that might affect you if you, for example, fail the very important 3-inch charge with reroll. That happens.
See, but when I play World Eaters, I don't have to make decisions.
That's not true. That's not true. Yeah. For example, I've played for a long time Corn Demons, and I was very sure that I can deliver 10 to 12 points versus the Space Marines, and there was a time where I've charged the 10 letter units with Bloodmaster, so +1 to wound, into the 10 chosen unit with something, I don't know, the Bile? Whatever.
Bio, probably. I think I remember that game.
Yeah, it didn't change the equation, but basically you have, with 1 throne click, keep that in mind. So you have basically 20 attacks with 3 up, then 2 up with reroll, and 5 attacks with 2 up, 2 up reroll. And each failed save, he launched the AOC, so he saved on 5s. Each failed save is a dead chosen. How many chosen have I killed?
Calculate the distance to the sun.
2, 3.
3. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know that.
Did he blank one of them?
No, because you can. He didn't even have to. Like he would fail. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are a number of tools you can use to do math, and one of the favorite things that I've noticed people like to do is to use these tools retrospectively to show how improbable something that happened was to happen. Like, okay, this was a 0.5% chance, guys. See, it's not my mistake. I got screwed over by the dice. It was so unlikely to happen. But speaking of tools, Jay, you've prepared something, and I'm going to put it on the screen, and there's a lot of math involved in it. So why don't you walk us through what you've actually got here? Is it on the screen? It's on the screen now. Can I put this? There we go. Hopefully that's visible for everyone now, and we're going to have a little chat. So Jay, over to you. What have we here?
Okay, so basically you have I prepared the example for just to vote in units that I've kept in mind for some time. So you have the berserks, and the legend from the right explains that you have in the first row the amount of attacks, then with -1 to hit with nothing, no modifier, so just 4 ups or 5 ups if you shoot indirectly, and with +1 to hit. So basic, and then the columns are the toughness profiles that you have to face. I'm not counting forward how many damage will it impact, because it will differ from the unit to unit based on the save, the cover, the strats that they might fire, like AOC or anything else. But basically, keeping in mind this table, I was wondering, for example, having 10 Votan Berserks, can I kill 2 Baby Knights? And the answer is yes, if you fire 1 CP strat and they both are just with 2 tokens. Otherwise, no. You can see it inside. Basically, Baby Knight has 12 health points, so you need the 4 failed saves to pass the golden line with 1 knight. So you need 8 to pass overall. And if you have just 1 judgment token, you can see hitting. It's wait for a second. Can I full screen? Yeah. You would hit with about 21 hits
Times.
nice times. Thank you. But without the second judgment token, you would wound only 7 times. So it's not enough. Even if you fire the 1 CP, which will be really required, because otherwise, even with 2 judgment tokens on both, you will wound them. It's almost 11 times. So by times 2 by 3, 22 by 3 is it's 7. So it's missing 3 health points from killing 2 knights if you don't fire a CP AP2 strat. Keeping in mind they are both judged by 2 tokens. So you have to think about those breakpoints when preparing for the matchup that you have in mind. So, for example, if you think the knights are very popular in the meta, I would encourage you to go through this exercises. Keep in mind, this is just a basic math. I'm not doing the percents. I'm not doing the probability of anything. It's just the
It's averages, basically, right?
Yeah, it's most probable value. It's just a singular math calculation. It's like the most common thing.
The statistical term is the expected value.
Okay, thank you.
So is the expected value equal to the average, like all of the times?
It's not that simple, because the expected value will include things like, if you have sustained hits, how many expected sustained hits can you expect to come in? Like, there are plenty of times when it is that, like the expected value of a D3 is 2, which is the same. It's just the average result. The expected value of a D6 is 3.5. And that's the average, but you're never going to get a 3.5 rolling a D6. So there are times, and then also you'll have stuff where it doesn't come out to the average, or it's not that simple, because you'll factor in lethal hits, sustained hits, AP modifiers, all that stuff.
So all the online calculators that people use for essentially calculating what we're looking at right now, do they use expected value as the basis, or is it?
They'll have it. Yeah, go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
I think Jay didn't want to say anything. I was finishing the question.
Yeah. No, they'll have it. What you find is, so there are 2 ways to do this, right? The first is to calculate the raw probabilities and build a curve based on that, where you say, okay, what are the chances of getting this many shots, this many hits, this many wounds, this much damage? What are the chances? And then doing that for each combination. What you end up finding is that it's easier computationally, and what most of the tools end up doing is you plug in the probabilities and then you simulate 10,000 times what's going to happen. And then the simulation, because if you do that for an arbitrarily large number of attempts, you will get the probability curve, or you will get something that's basically the same probability curve as doing the probability, just with less of a computational lift on the human. And so that's what a lot of the tools end up doing, is they'll give you that curve, because, to Jay's point, you can math out the expected value of your damage on 2 knights with berserks, but what that doesn't tell you is, okay, well, what if I roll a little bit worse than that? Do I still kill a knight? Like, do I still kill? How bad do my rolls have to be before?
It doesn't factor in luck. Simply.
Yeah. Well, so understanding the curve is helpful on that. You want to understand, because also there'll be times where you just go in and body somebody because you hit all your 6s and you get an insane roll, and it's never going to happen again. But you're always going to remember that in your weird lizard brain. And so then you'll make your decisions based on that one time you absolutely bodied Abaddon in the middle of the table with your Infernal Master rolling 5 6s on your Overwatch. Like that's going to live with me forever. And I'm going to do it every time and I'll lose. But you want to, the curves help you really understand, okay, how likely is it that I still get an outcome I can live with? And it's not always if you run your berserks into 2 baby knights and one of them's a carnivore or whatever, and you only kill one and the other one kind of lives and it's bracketed, is that an okay outcome? You get to figure out whether or not you eat too much damage on the return swing. But understanding the curve helps you understand just how bad a situation is it, or how good does it have to go for me for this to be worth it? And that's a lot of the tools are helping you understand that as well.
That's right. And I just want to update on my point, because understanding the curve is really important. And if you have a very common spot of danger, like Baby Knight, you should definitely look at the unit branch and use its potential. But when you're playing game to game and you face something that you haven't really thought about, for example, I don't know, the Sentinel, how probable is 5 berserks or 3 berserks killing a Sentinel? I haven't calculated it, but in the table, when I'm caught in while playing the game, I can do those calculations. And even if you don't really know the curve and you don't have very specific knowledge about some equation, you can, by counting the expected value, estimate how will it look like, or how should it look like.
Yeah,
it's not ideal, I agree.
What I usually see in games when people do this math, and this is kind of how I do it, is you say, okay, I'm going to charge in. I've got 6 attacks. Those hit on 3s. I'm going to miss with 2, so I'll have 4 hits left over. Half of those are going to wound. I'll wound twice, and then it's a 4-up save. One of those saves, and this is how much damage I'm left with. So if I have to do it back of the napkin right there at the table, that's usually how I'm doing it, and just kind of starting with some pool of dice and then taking out a number based on the rough probability. Is it 2/3, 1/3, or half?
Yeah. And the question is that enough in most cases? Probably should be, or has to be. Okay, Jay, you've already mentioned how you pick the profiles to calculate against. But is there a specific way of choosing which profiles of your army you want to check out? You probably should do the math for all of them, right? I mean, for Votan, it's fairly simple. It's not a very thick book, but for Space Marines, for example, who would bother to count all those profiles? Is there do you get a gut feeling from experience looking at profiles, and just that's something that you need to go through reps? Or
it's easier to be done from the author point of view. For example, you play in some specific meta. So, for example, you play in a meta where you have a lot of Space Marines or Elves or GSC or anything else. So you should think about what most probably will you be facing if you play singles, or what is your role in teams. and you should prepare the exact profiles that will counter the things that you're looking at. So don't look at every profile in your book. It will waste a lot of your time. Yes, I've done it. But you should just think about what you will face and find the best profile to counter it.
And go from there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, I'm going to take that off the screen. And Jay, thanks very much. You were better prepared for this episode than I am for 90% of the shows we're doing. So kudos to you. Rob,
Thank you.
You're doing the Hammer of Math now, and only today have I found out that you haven't started it actually. But do you know what was the inspiration to start the series of articles?
Well, so actually, I did start the series. I just
okay.
split with Kevin for a while. So we understood that there was a lot of opportunity to do statistical content for Warhammer. Like Math Hammer content has always been popular, going back to the days of the old DACA forums. And so, we knew that we wanted to write stuff about that, and then just started kind of doing it. I think the big one was the charge math. The early stuff we did was like, how do you understand what's really going on when you roll a die? Understanding that the probability of 2d6 is way different from 1d6 because it's normally distributed rather than uniformly distributed as a result. And I think people kind of like people who play a lot of board games get that, but if you're not into that, it's not quite as intuitive, and people don't really understand that as much. And so we started with how do you predict 9-inch charges, or what's the math behind that? What's the math behind different charge ranges? And kind of went from there. And at some point, I handed off primary duties to that to Kevin Gensen, who's he's a Goonhammer co-owner and co-founder, and he's an engineer who does a lot of work, and he lives in Maryland, does a lot of engineering work, and he was doing some wonderful work on that, and he had to step back last year, so I took it back over. But usually we'd split duty. He'd take on certain stat stuff. He's big on the simulation side. I like to do the same things Jay does. I like to work in Excel and just do the raw probabilities on a lot of things. But I do a lot more of the meta-analysis stuff. So, because we have tons of data that we get from tabletop battles and 40K stats. And so taking that data and crunching it is as interesting to me as the stats data inside the game. One of the things I'm working on this week that I worked on, we published an article on Monday this week about Folger Piles was running Yutani at Adepticon. And I looked at his scores, and I noticed he had like 5 consecutive 100s. And I was like, I looked at my scoring in tabletop battles, and I was like, I score a 100 once every 7 or 8 games, maybe. And so, and so then I was immediately like, hey, is this weird? Like, should this be happening? Is this like a talking it out kind of thing? And then some of the other comp players in our channel were like, well, actually, no, you're just very good at scoring, especially because they can score more objectives on turn 1. And so what I started doing was pulling all of the data. We have a proprietary tool we keep called Data Slate, where we use that to store data from different tournament software and tabletop battles and unify it. And I started looking at the stats on Yutani in there, and I found out, no, actually, it does, in fact, you have certain detachments that are just really, really good at scoring 100s because they can do what I call safely score on turn 1. There's a lot of stuff, because then the next piece, we did this, there were 2 pieces of this analysis. The first was, are there detachments and armies that are better at scoring 100, better at scoring 50 on primary, 40 on secondary, because those are 2 separate challenges. And then are there, like, what's the likelihood that if you just drew every secondary and scored it, you would get 100 points? Because that's part of it too. Sometimes you draw Defend Stronghold, that's only ever going to be 3 points. Sometimes you draw Storm Hostile when your opponent is like, this is one of the things, it's one of the weird dynamics, is if you're bodying an opponent, if you're dominating them and you draw Storm Hostile late in the game, it's a dead secondary. Even though it's worth a lot of points, you don't want to draw it if you've already controlled every objective on the table, except for your opponent's home, and you can't get that one. So there are different things. So we started building a simulation model on that. But then that comes up with all kinds of other questions. So the first piece is we did come back to, like, actually, yeah, it turns out Yutani are fantastic at scoring secondaries. But then we're working right now on the simulation model piece where you have to factor in stuff like, okay, how realistic is it that somebody, even with Yutani, is going to score engage on all fronts for 4 points if they draw at turn 1? because yeah, it's scoreable for many armies, especially in certain maps, but you don't actually want to run units all the way over to the other quadrant of the table and leave them to die on turn one if you don't have a ton of units. And so there's a lot of stuff like that where you can draw this and score at turn one, but it's not a good idea to do that. And so when we look at the actual percent, like when we look at the expected value of the secondaries, which is basically the average scored for that secondary. So it's like, the amount you would score time. It's the weighted average of what you scored and the time, the percentage of times you scored it. That gives you like some really cool stats. You see like, oh, actually the freest secondary in the game is extend battle lines, and the one no one ever gets is call, and you knew that. But there's some stuff where people just don't score some of these other ones because you just have to do too much if you draw them early, and it puts you in a losing position you don't want to be in. So the next piece is like, how do we build out a simulation model? And then from there, how do you identify? So like, because then you get two really cool pieces of information, right? The first is, are there armies that are more likely to score 100? Because if that's the case, you have to play those armies, right? Like competitively, if you want to be good, you have to play this.
Mm-hmm.
Same problem in 9th edition. Like you had to play Necrons and Sisters, and if you couldn't score 100 points, it wasn't worth bringing your army to the game because you would just lose on the fact that your max was 94 and a Necron going first was 100 and their minimum was 90 or whatever. So that's the first piece. But the other piece is like, then we can say, okay, well, we saw that Ynnari consistently score 50s and 40s better. And there was some really cool stuff in there. So like you find out that really elite armies that are good at sitting on objectives are actually very good at scoring 50 on primary. But it's way easier to score 50 on primary for everyone than it is to score 40 on secondaries. And so the advantage of being a big, beefy elite army is relatively small because most fast or numerous armies can go down early and just catch up late because a lot of missions give you the ability to score 60 or 70 over the course of a game, and you can make that up. Whereas on secondaries, you don't have that. So what you end up finding is that actually armies with lots of bodies first and then a lot of speed second are hugely advantaged in the scoring game in Warhammer 40K. And those end up having to be the majority of, and those end up, so when you start making team determinations, what armies do you want to bring? Those can end up dominating your discussions or being a huge part of your discussion because you have to score a lot of points to get 20 O's. And so that's a piece of it. And the other one is when we looked at it, Folger was still outpacing everybody in the field. And there are other players that I've seen do this. We mentioned Alex Harrison and Josh Roberts. So then the question is, how are they playing with their secondaries? And then how do you take that? And then, because that's the coolest part, because then you can say, okay, how does the decision-making have to change? Because I almost never, as a player, pay CP to discard a secondary turn one. Like, it never happens. If I draw a dead secondary turn one, I'm just like, that's the game. I'll get CP for it later, and that's what I'm going to do, because I expect to draw something else that's dead. Part of that is that I play Chaos Space Marines, and the rules are different for Yabos and Power Armor that only move 6 inches, but part of it is that, like, I just don't think about secondaries that way. So the question is, is there a different strategy for playing secondaries, tactical secondaries, that I should be thinking about? And that's what the simulation work and looking at like Folger's play will get us to.
Yeah, but I think that's like an entirely different topic on how you handle your secondary economy. I also often don't. I also often don't recycle turn one for a CP because I'm worried that I'm not going to have enough CP on turns 2, 3 where I'm going for a go turn, and I might lack the damage or whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting topic. Otherwise, but what I wanted to ask around Hammer of Math still is, where'd you get the ideas for each of the write-ups? I mean, you've kind of answered it already, right? You saw Folger get 500s in a row. Okay, that's a topic to explore. You've started Emperor's Children. All right, let's count how Flawless Blades deal damage at different attachments. Is there more to it, or it's just whatever interests you in any given moment?
What's really most of the time we're looking at books and armies and saying, like, especially anytime we get a new book that we have to do a review of, we're looking at it and going, okay, what are the 2 or 3 interesting statistical things we can write about in this book? It gets harder as you go because you get a lot of stuff where, like, I can't really write about sustained hits versus lethal hits again. That's been written. Flawless Blades are interesting because they have that whole dynamic of getting 3-ups to wound everything and then losing a model, so you can kind of do some interesting stuff there. but a lot of it's really just about like what's an interesting question with the army. Like if I was playing this army new, and we go through and look at the book and we say, okay, well, what are the really interesting choices you have to make that we can model with statistics? What are the interesting weapon choices? What are the rule choices? What kind of like, and then some of it is also like what's going to be eye catching. Like what can we talk about? Is this unit like so tough that it's worth writing about how tough they are? Is this unit so much damage that it's worth writing about how much damage they do? Seer Council was like that when we started talking about the Eldar stuff. One of our players, James Kelling, was going crazy about the Seer Council being able to Voltron together like 20 different guys or 30, like 4 or 5 different units in weird ways. And so then it was, okay, well, what can this unit do and what statistically are they capable of? That ends up being an interesting one, but a lot of it is just going through the books and saying, okay, well, what do we think somebody would ask a question about?
It's also what people expect, I think. So
yeah,
it's welcome. Right, Jay, I need to ask you a question, and a little bit of a different nature, however, still related to math. As we said at the very beginning, you're a debutant of the Polish national team and so on. I love that word. So how do the captains or the team selectors approach? How do I ask this question? How do they approach math, or do they have any expectations towards players on the team? I don't know, to be able to justify their choices, or like to prove to explain why they've made choices like that through math. So have you presented your sheets or the results of your calculations to any of the people on the team to justify something that you have done, or is there no such expectation whatsoever, and you do what you want to do?
I'm sorry, but I have to disappoint you. The players that are not on the WTC level yet, so me including, just get the list from someone that really knows what's about. So you play the list from Sacco or from Tim from Germany. I'm playing Tim's list, and basically when you get the list and you start to know what this army is about, how is it working, how can you use it on the tournament, you then can fit it if you talk with your captain. Is he cool about it? If you persuade him to that your idea might be cool because meta has changed or anything else, I think you can do it.
Okay. So in your approach, have you actually disseminated people's armies in that mathematical way? So do you have like an Excel sheet for Sacco's list, Excel sheet for Tim's list, and so on, or you don't go that deep?
In the Demons, I was going that deep, but I don't play the Tommy anymore, so I'm not up to date with current things. One statistical fun thing for you, Robert, if you want to hear about demons for a second. On the incursion detachment, you can have the demon prince on foot with Mark of Nurgle, which is toughness 11, I think, which once per game launches the free up invulnerable save, and you can, for a CP, launch the free rolling point to inv. It's really fun to do math on this piece.
Are you doing the T12 with the Great Unclean one now, right?
Yeah.
Do you do the matrices for your team?
Yeah. For every event, even the sparring or the least, the smallest, like local tournament, we're doing matrices with the estimations like 2, 4, 5, 5, 7, 8, 12, and so on.
That's what
Those are
we
big
do.
events.
Right. Moving on, I've got 2 tools that we can show that can help you people at home, and you won't have to use Excel because everyone likes it. One of them, Jay's mentioned it a while back, is Unit Crunch. So this is a website, basically, simply speaking, And that allows you to do a number of simple calculations, and you get the curves that we've mentioned in the conversation here. So what I've done is I've taken noise marines to be a little bit different from Rob's article. And I've put in the profiles of the Blastmaster, the Sonic Blaster, and I'm shooting a humble rhino. So and obviously there's like the 10,000 simulations that are done, and you get a graph like this. Now, I'm not using this as much as I would like to be using this, so I'm hoping one of our guests can maybe pick up the conversation from me at some point. But you can see what the final damage is, what's the expected result, so median average in this case, what's the chance of actually dealing more damage, and what's the chance of, killing your target. You've got all your different tabs. You've got the mean damage. So, like Rob mentioned before, the mean result in a d6 is a 3.5 that you're never going to get. In this case, it's a 7.2. We're not doing 7.2 damage in this game. And you can also check your different profiles that you've input here, although it didn't remember the names that I changed. I wish I had a Mega Space Culverin and a Triple Void Pistol. Those sound really Warhammery from 2nd edition days. That's pretty cool. And yep, you also have the distribution of hits here, or wounds dealt, unsaved wounds, and then damage dealt, right? So you can check each step of the actual shooting phase in this case.
And what Jay pointed out earlier is a great point. It's really more about finding your targets. So like the old stats term that we used to use was MEQ, or Marine Equivalent.
Yeah,
which
that
has
was a
changed a little
thing.
bit now that there are 2 wounds. But yeah, like you want to basically run your math. You don't have to run against, like, it's more important to run against targets than it is to run specific weapons, because most of the time there isn't really a difference between strength 4 and 5 weapons. It's really more about like what you're going up against. And so understanding, again, like, how does this do into Terminators? How does this do into Marines? How does this do into vehicles? Most of the vehicles in the game, like, what really matters is that they're T9 plus with a 3-up save, right? And so figuring out, and then, sometimes you have to go into a Dorn and you need to know what that math looks like very specifically. But understanding what your odds look like into a few different targets is way more valuable in helping figure out, is this the right unit? Because then on the table, it's is this the right unit for that job, or do I have the right units for this job for the event that I'm going to run? And this is a great proof of that.
Yeah, I just wanted to show here that you can also add modifiers, all sorts of ones. So let's go for rerolls, for example. And we're gonna assume that we're playing Coteries here, and we get 3 kills, which allows us to reroll hit and wound rolls of 1, and we'll see how that affects our little rhino. We can add another one. Yeah, add the wound reroll real quick.
So what I find these are the most useful for, the thing that's the biggest pain in the ass when you're doing Excel or your own calculations, and what these do really well with, is when you have rerolls mixed with effects like sustained hits.
Yep.
It won't give you necessarily the fishing results, but it gives you a much easier way to go through and say, okay, I'm rerolling ones and I've got sustained hits, which means I'm going to expect to get an additional, 0.16 sustained hits every time I roll. That ends up being way easier to do with a tool like this. And so it's really helpful for that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I saw it in this one, but you can actually select the fishing option. Yeah, so just building that out is way easier, like you said, than trying to do it in Excel. I can't find it right now.
You could as well just whip out your dice and try and roll it out, but I guess it's going to be more time consuming. But that's what I do.
That's what you do. Yep. Anyway, there is an FAQ here in Unit Crunch, so that I had a skim through it earlier on. It is very helpful, so you can find Some of the answers, there we go. Fishing for results is described, for example. So that's all good stuff. But I've got one other thing that I can show here, but I'll need a moment to bring it up. So Tweak, maybe you can fill the void with your.
I have a question for Jay, actually.
There we go.
Because I'm prepping for some
Rob
team
taking
events this
over.
year, and I'm interested in this. How do you create your matrices when you're doing those? Like, what's the process that you go into doing that? How much of that is player results versus expected outcomes?
Basically, if you want to fill in the matrix for something that you haven't played before, I encourage you to test the game before, because you might find that math is impacting only up to a certain point the matchup. As you've mentioned before, the Emperor's Children that we've all thought on the paper looks just bland, but with having the whole army, fallback shoot, charge, everything. Like, yes, you can do everything. It's really powerful, and it's not going to show up in math. It's really hard to estimate something properly without playing the matchup with the person equal or better skilled than you. So outside of playing the matchup at least 2 times you don't start the positive negative scenario and you take the middle ground for the estimation. Uh, the table is also dependent. Uh, the estimation won't be complete, and you have to write about it in the comment that you haven't played the matchup and it's something that you've mapped out or you think it will be that way. Because for the pairing person, the information that you're not experienced in the matchup is also the information that they have to think about when pairing the people.
Yep, it's actually so multifaceted, and I can show you. Like, I don't know if I think I'm sharing my screen right now. It should be working. I don't know.
Not quite.
Not
Now
quite.
you are.
Yeah, Joker, if you could like. So this is like Joker and I. We're playing in. I think this is vibe check. So
Don't show round two.
No,
please.
it's round one, obviously. So essentially, how we structured it, and I imagine most teams do something similar because the same is happening now for tryhard. Essentially, you have the armies of your opponents with lists and so on. So whoever has the experience of playing against that would give you a description, more or less, like what the army does, and then based on that, people can make their estimation with going through the legend of like we always have this conditional formatting. So whenever you input a score, it adjusts the color. So it's like visual indication for the captain or whoever is going to be doing the pairings of how the player feels against a certain army. But it's also in the team's environment, you need to take into account the tables and the mission that you will be playing on. So that's always I always tell my players if I'm captaining or I'm the captain to take into consideration how you will play the mission. Do you have I don't know, if the mission focuses on battle line units doing actions or something, do you have battle line in your army, blah, blah, blah. But then also, like, tables differ. Those are old WTC tables. The layouts have changed now, but still, like, look at the tables. And this is something that you cannot really show in the score. You need comments. So I always ask my players to also do a little bit of a write up, and then based on that, you can make a decision. And I always, when I estimate, I always start with a draw, and then I decide whether I have a good matchup into something or a bad matchup into something, and based on that, I either give myself more points or fewer points depending on how I feel about the game. But that's me.
I appreciate the sheet name Fuck Elves vibe.
That's our team name for the league.
Love it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
And our first round opponents didn't actually play Eldari, so that was very disappointing.
Damn it.
Anyway, I've got another tool I wanted to show, so I'm going to bring it up. It took me quite a while to actually be able to share a phone screen here, so I'm going to do it even if you're bored with it already. But also worth mentioning is that I've actually had the creator of this app message the podcast fan page asking if we could show it off, and I've had a little play around with it. This is called AdaptRow. It's a phone app. You can download it from whatever iPhone users have, and from the Google Play Store
We just
for
call
you
it App
Android
Store.
people. Yeah, there you go. And I've put in essentially the same thing. So this is Noise Marine shooting a rhino. I'm gonna process the results, and if I remember correctly, it showed the same result because I mean, there's only the math is all the same, right? Well, it shows you initially it shows you the split for each weapon profile, and then you've got the models graph, and there's chances of killing defender models per weapon. You've got yeah, so this is
Your modifiers, blah blah blah.
exactly what the saving profile is saving as, and oh, there you go, survivability, defender survivability per weapon. So there's really lots of stuff you can do here, and I mean, I think that could be helpful when you're playing a game because it's probably easier to access than going through Unit Crunch in this case. But both of these tools are equally good, I would say. So choose your favorite, and yeah, you can now do maths easily. See, this is what they don't tell you in school. You
No,
actually
they
won't
cover
need.
all of this in school, man. I don't know how
They
to tell
don't
you
tell
that.
you that you have to do that. You won't have to do it all in your head. That you can cheat. You can use electronic devices to cheat your way through life, and this is applicable here as well.
But you don't have to, and you won't be the victim of your phone battery being dead on the tournament in turn 2.
Yeah, it's
Probably yes.
I would
You've got
suggest what you
this.
really want to do is internalize these, right? You want to do it outside the game and get familiar with like this is what I can expect, because then when you get in the game, you don't want to have to pull out a different app and track that, and then you have to worry about your phone battery, and you have to worry about the clock time. What you want to do is get like it's wonderful app, very slick. I really like the look of it. Do that stuff before the game, understand what your units are going to do, use that to make your decisions, and then know what you want to do when you're in the game.
Eventually, with the reps, you're probably
Yeah.
gonna memorize it anyway. So it's just for this initial sort of calculation, and then
Yeah, but you want to short circuit the reps, right? Like the difference between me and Inez Wilson is somewhere in the area of 300 games a year. I'm never going to close that gap. And so, you know, anything you can do, like I get in a good like 100 and 120 games, but like for players who are trying to get to that level, you want to short circuit or bypass as much of that like learning things the hard way as possible, and the apps can help you do that.
Was it you guys or StatCheck that created that table of some of the popular players saying how
That
many
was
games
me.
they've? Yeah, I mean, someone I don't know if it was in a couple of saying they've played 2,000 games since the inception of 10th, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Get
that's
a lot
of
five.
TTS in
That's
there.
like 5 games a day. I mean, I call bullshit on that.
There's a lot of TTS in there. There's a lot of games you don't finish. Like, I mean, also, not every game
Oh,
NS plays at an event will go 3 hours. So that's a huge piece of it too.
that is true, and probably even more so during TTS, right? You can play out 2 rounds and then say I've played 5 games, do it in 5 hours. I guess, yeah. If you look at it that way, it might be possible.
Teams is trickier because you're playing for the score, and anytime I play someone from teams, I know it's going to be a long game because those guys are always crazy about grabbing every point they can, and I appreciate it. But when you're playing singles, most games you know what's going to happen after turn 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one outcome, right? That matters.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a 5 difference or if it's 50 at that point in the singles.
It's also you get a really good feel early on of like who's going to win broadly. Then it's like not every game, but a lot of games like you know that, especially if there's a skill disparity. But with teams, that's one of the benefit. Like, that's some of the beauty of teams is that it's not really about winning or losing in those broad strokes. It's about making sure that you it's making sure you avoid someone else eking out the tie or dragging your team score down.
Yeah, right. Jay, I've got one final question for you, at least for me. In your opinion, is doing the math homework necessary to become a better competitive player? I mean, I'm asking you this because you're going through the strides. You've come back to the hobby. You're getting better and better. You're now being selected for the second round of team selection, the national team selection. So, what's your take on it? What do you think?
I think definitely. Without doing the math, you cannot really understand the game that we're playing in. The amount of stuff that bases on math is astounding. You cannot really go through as a competitive player without understanding the math underneath this game and blaming the dice that because of some entropy and you've taken, I don't know, every last cannon possible and you've rolled too many ones. It's not gonna help you progress as a person and as a player in the competitive scene. You need to stop blaming the entropy in the dice and you need to think about the math of your movement, the secondaries, the primary. There's a lot more than just the dice in this game. And you can math it out. I'll try to.
Excellent. Excellent closing statement. Tweak, anything you want to ask still? Or shall
so
we wrap it up?
I mean, just a brief question to Rob. After creating or co-creating Goonhammer for such a long time and so on, do you have the feeling that your work, I mean, not only shapes the hobby but also shapes what GW does? Do you feel like the great company that releases the figurines, the rules, and so on, that they actually pay attention to your articles and shape what they do based on them?
Oh yeah, we know they do. Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, they do.
I'll get feedback all the time. Well, because like part of it is like we talk to those guys. Like we're on the creator program. They're people we talk to. Like I talk to Mike Brandt when I'm at events and stuff. Like it's and there's also like we're also people who've been in the game for a long time. We've had people who've been on the playtest team working for us. We've had like it's not that large a community, and also like they're reading our articles. Like occasionally we'll get back feedback that's like, hey, you really pissed so and so off with this article, which is good. We want that to happen, but at the same time, we know that there are people there that read it, but also what they actually do and don't pay attention to is, it's a matter of preference on their end. It
Of
depends
course.
on what we're saying and what we're doing. There are certain things that we think about when we write it, but for us, it's less about is Games Workshop listening and more about are we taking what we think is the right tack and are we being professional in it? I get a lot of times people are like, oh, how come you were so nice in this? Or, how come you didn't say meaner stuff? And it's like, because we're trying to be professional. Like, you can say that something sucks without calling somebody names. And so that ends up being a big piece of it. And yeah, we do know they listen. And there's also times when like the more DACA stuff recently, like we were happy to come out and beat the drum on that and be like, hey, this shit sucks. Something's got to change here. And we know that if we're reporting that, then what'll happen is whether Games Workshop reads us or not, and we know that they do, because it's also some of them, it's literally their job to make sure that they know what we're doing. But then also once we do that, we'll publish it on Reddit. Art of War is going to publish something on it or talk about it. It's just good content. That'll be part of the drumbeat, and people who didn't know about it will read our content, and like that will be part of it as well. But it's also a big responsibility for us. For us, it's really more like the Goonhammer. The Goonhammer mission is we talk about the games we love, and so one of the other things where people are like, why do you say more bad things about this? Because I don't know about you, man, but I love Warhammer. I'm not writing about a game that I hate, so I mostly want to say nice things about it. I'm here because I love the game. If I didn't love the game, I wouldn't put in 9 to 5 at the Warhammer factory on my weekends playing at tournaments. So like that's the other part of it. And yeah, we know they read it. We know that there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and it's good, but it's a responsibility, and you got to take the reader's perception seriously. You got to make sure that you're reporting things or talking about things that are true and backed up, and not just going out of your way to say shit that's inflammatory, because I hate that.
I love the answer, and I'm really happy that I asked this question. We're blessed to have you.
Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
The whole of Goonhammer, because I can't imagine a week without reading competitive innovations. But I mean, yeah, you guys are doing God's work.
That is one of my favorite. It's one of our most popular articles, and it's one of my favorite things we do because not only does James Grover Wings do a fantastic job with it, and Tom Lohman, who does the Friday edition, but we get about once a month we'll get emails from people from different countries saying, hey, we just ran our first tournament that's 28 people, we'd love to be in competitive innovations, what do you need to know about the mission pack, what do you need to know about the players, we'll help you with all that stuff. And that's really great. Like Argentina, I always feel bad because we'll get emails from someone, it's like, yeah, we just ran our first big event, and it's like Greece or Argentina or somewhere, and there'll be like 20 people, and I'll be like, well, we don't really cover 20-person events, or we don't really do a lot of teams events for this because the lists don't really translate all the time. And then when they come back to us like 2 months later and they're like, we got 28 people at our event, it's like, okay, we have to showcase
They've earned
that. I love seeing that.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you
that's
also bring the
wonderful.
community together. I mean, yeah, as I said, admirable.
It's a good time, man. For competitive 40K is as popular as it has ever been. No matter what anyone tells you about, like, oh, I think the game was better whenever, or like, oh, this detachment, the game is more popular now than it has ever been. There are more
Yeah,
people playing
exactly.
competitively in the ITC than there ever were last year or the year before. It gets bigger every year. Games Workshop are putting real support into the competitive scene, and it's paying off big time. I think that's great. They're doing more work at the UKTC. They're doing more support for international events, which is great. The biggest problem with the ITC was that it was very US heavy, though it was really funny watching the US guys get upset as the UKTC kind of short circuited it, and by running a super major every month. But it's also like it's awesome to see how the game's developing and doing in other countries. It's awesome to see teams come in every year. I'm rooting for Team Poland because my friend Danny is a big fan of Team Poland, and whenever and also we all get together as a server during the WTC and root against England. So we can all agree on that one thing.
Excellent.
That's definitely a common one.
All right, Rob, Jay, it was wonderful to have you guys over. I've really enjoyed this one, so hopefully you listeners also have enjoyed this one. But we'll be wrapping up for today. So if you like what we do, please hit like, subscribe, bell button, what have you. Consider becoming a patron. Thank you if you already are one. Thanks to our sponsors, the Army Painter and Weyland-Yutani. And thank you to my co-host Tweak for helping me out in hosting this interview. Bonus for those who are not asleep yet or are bored in their afternoon in the US. In 15 minutes, we're going to do a live pairings session for the Tryhard 8v8 League. So come join us if you're interested. But for now, we will be signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye.